The universe didn't blink when Earth was invited to join the Galactic Accord. There was no fanfare, no golden delegation arriving in shimmering ships. Just a curt transmission from the Accord's Central Council, a test, a challenge, and then, maybe, membership, the challenge. A single human chosen to represent Earth in a trial of capability, physical, mental, moral. The opponent, an overlord named Xalzor, a being responsible for subjugating over 100 systems, chosen by the Accord's Council to evaluate the new species, the human. Kyle Granger, 35, former firefighter from Missouri, recently recruited by Earth's fledgling interplanetary diplomatic service. He wasn't a super soldier, not a genius, just stubborn, calm under pressure, and as it turned out, very good at not dying. He arrived on the Accord station 2 weeks before the trial. Orbiting a dead star, the station was built from blackstone mined from neutron remnants. It hummed slightly, like it was alive. Kyle stepped off the shuttle, adjusting the collar of his basic uniform. He didn't look like much, broad-shouldered, a bit of a limp from an old stairwell collapse, weathered face, clear green eyes. He turned to his handler, a thin, blue-skinned alien named Corvin. "So I just fight this guy?" Kyle asked. Corvin didn't blink, perhaps because he didn't have eyelids. "Not quite. The trial of evaluation has 3 segments, 1 physical, 1 strategic, 1 ethical," Kyle exhaled. "Great, I get to be judged by an intergalactic war criminal on morality." Corvin tilted his head. "Xalzor is many things." "Criminal is not the term the council would use." Kyle didn't respond. He just kept walking. The first 4 days were medical scans, neural mapping, and briefings. Earth was allowed a small staff, but Kyle slept alone in a cubic room with a gravity variance that made his knees ache. On the 5th day, he met Xalzor. The Overlord was taller than Kyle by at least 3 feet. Humanoid in build, with a segmented armor like hide, his face was a rigid plate with 4 vertical slits where a mouth might have been. He wore no weapons, but didn't need any. His presence alone silenced the room. "You are the chosen of Earth." Xalzor's voice was low and metallic. Kyle nodded. "Kyle Granger, you can call me Kyle." "I will not," Xalzor said. "Names are earned." Kyle resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "All right." The next morning, the first trial began. They stood inside a simulation dome, the walls flickering with artificial terrain. Kyle wore a simple suit with biometric sensors. Xalzor wore nothing. Corvin's voice came through the intercom. "Begin the physical evaluation." Lights flared. The dome became a jagged mountainscape, high winds, and a temperature barely above freezing. "Reach the summit," Corvin said. "Whoever arrives first succeeds." Xalzor launched forward like a cannonball. Kyle didn't even try to match him. He studied the terrain. The direct route was vertical, icy, and unstable. Instead, Kyle zigzagged. He moved carefully, conserving energy. After 20 minutes, he spotted Xalzor halfway up, hanging from a collapsing ledge. Kyle stopped. He could turn, go around, gain the lead. Instead, he moved toward the Overlord. He found a narrow ledge and yelled up. "Xalzor, you all right? I require no assistance." The ledge beneath Xalzor cracked. Kyle didn't hesitate. He retrieved a coil of tether from his pack, tied it to a rock, and tossed the other end. "Grab it." Xalzor hesitated, then caught the rope. Kyle dug his heels in. The strain tore at his hip, but he held. Inch by inch, Xalzor pulled himself up. When the Overlord reached the top, he turned. "You could have one," Kyle shrugged, panting. "Didn't feel right." They reached the summit together. Corvin's voice returned. "Trial 1 complete. Proceed to debrief." Back in the observation chamber, Kyle collapsed into a seat. A medical bot approached to check his vitals. His blood pressure was high, oxygen low. "You exerted yourself unnecessarily," Xalzor said. "Yeah," Kyle replied, "but you're heavier." "Pulling you up wasn't exactly a vacation." Xalzor stared at him. "I am not accustomed to such decisions in competitors." Kyle leaned back. "Get used to it." The next day brought trial 2, strategy. A holographic war table lit the chamber. Kyle and Xalzor were placed on opposing sides. The simulation, a planetary conflict. Each had control of forces. The goal, Prevent the destruction of a populated city, Kyle studied the layout. Xalzor immediately launched a flanking maneuver, sending drones to destroy the enemy base. Kyle didn't attack. He reinforced the city's defenses, evacuated civilians, and rerouted power grids to shield infrastructure. 30 minutes in, Xalzor's assault stalled. His forces met resistance in unexpected places. Kyle had anticipated his moves not with superior tactics, but by guessing what Xalzor would consider efficient. When the trial ended, Corvin announced the outcome: city intact, simulated civilian casualties, minimal. Kyle Granger's strategy prioritized life over victory. Trial 2 complete. Xalzor did not speak until they were alone. That was not a military victory, Kyle stood. Nope, it was survival. He limped out of the chamber. The final trial was less defined. The chamber was empty, no terrain, no simulation. Corvin entered with a small gray box. He set it between them. This is a moral dilemma, he said. Contained within is a neural disruptor. You are instructed to activate it. Doing so will end the life of an imprisoned criminal. He is guilty of genocide on 2 worlds. Kyle frowned. Why is he in a box? He is sedated. Awaiting authorized execution. Xalzor stood still. The final trial is yours, Corvin said. You must decide, justice or mercy. Kyle stepped forward. What happens if I refuse? The criminal is released. Xalzor narrowed his eyes. He will kill again. Kyle turned the box over, no markings. Just a button. I'm not a judge, Kyle said. You are now, Corvin replied. Kyle sat down. He stared at the box for several minutes, then he pushed it away. No, Xalzor's muscles tensed. Explain. We're supposed to be better than monsters, Kyle said. Even when it's hard. Corvin took the box. Trial 3 complete. Later, in Kyle's quarters, Xalzor arrived unannounced. The room barely fit him. He stood in silence for a long while. You chose weakness. Kyle was icing his knee. Maybe. But I'll sleep tonight. Xalzor crouched, his tone quieter. I challenged you to expose your flaws. I found them, and I do not understand why they are strengths. Kyle chuckled. Yeah, that's kind of our thing. That night, Corvin appeared with the council's verdict. Earth is accepted. Your performance exceeded projections. Kyle nodded. Great, can I go home now? Corvin paused. Xalzor has requested a rematch. Kyle blinked. You mean, another trial? No, a personal challenge for honor. Kyle exhaled slowly. Of course he did. The challenge was set, hand-to-hand combat. No weapons, no suits, just an open arena on the Accord station. Xalzor stood waiting, armored skin gleaming under the lights. Kyle entered slowly, his ribs still sore from the earlier trials. The crowd was silent. You sure about this? Kyle asked. Xalzor nodded. I misjudged you. I wish to understand. Then he lunged. Kyle barely dodged in time. The impact cracked the floor behind him. He ducked under a sweeping arm and sent a fist into Xalzor's side. It was like punching a wall. Pain shot up Kyle's arm. He winced, backing away. Xalzor didn't press. He waited. Kyle circled, breathing hard. He remembered the firefighting drills, how to use momentum, how to redirect force. He baited Xalzor into striking again, then rolled under the blow, slamming an elbow into the Overlord's knee joint. Xalzor stumbled. Kyle followed with a kick to the back of the leg. The Overlord dropped to one knee, then, with a sudden twist, Xalzor grabbed Kyle by the torso and threw him. Kyle hit the ground hard. His shoulder exploded in pain. He couldn't lift his arm. Corvin's voice came through the arena. Combat may be ended, Kyle groaned. No. I'm not done. He stood slowly, left arm limp. He took a step forward. Xalzor raised a hand. Enough, you would die to prove a point, Kyle coughed. Not for a point, for the people watching. Silence, then Xalzor bowed. You have defeated me, Kyle blinked. Really? Can you write that down? Later, in the med bay, Kyle lay with his shoulder immobilized, a real fracture. He'd need surgery and at least 8 weeks to recover. Corvin stood at his bedside. You have changed, Xalzor. Kyle smiled faintly. He threw me like a lawn chair. Corvin tilted his head. Is that a compliment? Kyle chuckled. Depends on the chair. The council formally recognized Kyle's victory. Earth was not only accepted but offered a seat on the Accord's ethics committee. Xalzor visited once more before Kyle's departure. "You are not the strongest," he said. "Nor the smartest," Kyle nodded. "Thanks. But you are the most confounding. I will study your kind further." Kyle extended his good hand. "Fair enough." Xalzor hesitated, then shook it. As the shuttle lifted off, Kyle looked out the viewport. "If that's first contact," he muttered, "I don't want to see the sequel." But deep down, he knew he'd do it all again, given the chance. Because sometimes the galaxy doesn't need warriors or geniuses. Sometimes it needs someone who just won't quit. Kyle woke to the sterile scent of antiseptic and the dull throb of something very out of place inside his shoulder. A ceiling panel above him blinked faintly with a swirling blue pattern, like a lazy whirlpool, probably meant to soothe. It felt more like a screensaver from a forgotten dentist's office. He tried to sit up. A firm but gentle pressure pushed him back down. Mechanical hands adjusted the sling holding his arm in place. "You dislocated the scapulohumeral joint," said a voice beside him. "And cracked the coracoid process. You're lucky the fracture's incomplete." A tall, insectoid figure with 6 arms and an enviable posture stood by the medbed. Its carapace was a soft matte green, and it wore a wraparound diagnostic visor that flickered with Kyle's vitals. "Do you have a name?" Kyle asked groggily. "I am Vet. I oversee trauma recovery for all carbon-based life forms in this quadrant." "Well, Vet, I don't suppose you've got any coffee." "I do not." "Your species is the only one that consumes neurostimulants in liquid form while injured." Kyle sighed. "That tracks." Vet tapped something on the bedside console. Kyle's sling repositioned itself slightly, aligning the shoulder with something that felt like it might be from a medieval torture manual. "You will require surgical stabilization within 72 hours. A graft patch will reinforce the bone, and biosutures will restore ligament tension." "I'd ask for a second opinion," Kyle muttered, "but I get the feeling you're the only game in town." Vet didn't respond. It simply adjusted its visor and moved to a tray of instruments nearby, selecting what looked suspiciously like a meat thermometer. A chime sounded. The door to the medbay slid open. Corvin entered, holding a translucent datasheet. "The Council wishes to debrief you before the medical procedure." Kyle blinked. "Can I at least have pants first? You are clothed." "Not in a way that counts." Corvin turned to Vet. "Can he be moved?" Vet didn't look up. "He can be wheeled." Moments later, Kyle was rolling down a corridor with all the grace of a shopping cart with a busted wheel. The medbed glided on anti-grav pads, but Kyle still felt every bump like a percussion test on his ribs. Corvin walked beside him, datasheet in hand, eyes scanning lines of unreadable glyphs. "The Council is curious," Corvin said. "Your species emphasizes individual autonomy, yet you accepted a trial with planetary consequences." "Why?" "Because the alternative was letting Xalzor evaluate Earth without context," Kyle said. "I figured it was better to show who we are than let someone else define it." Corvin didn't respond. He just turned a corner, guiding the medbed toward a chamber marked with a symbol that looked like 3 concentric spirals. The doors parted to reveal a circular room with tiered seating. 4 council delegates hovered in their seats, each a different species, none remotely humanoid. Kyle's bed stopped in the center. He sat up slightly, shoulder aching. The delegate nearest him resembled a mass of translucent fibers suspended in a jelly-like casing. It pulsed lightly as it spoke. "We have observed your conduct. Your decisions during the trial were unorthodox." Kyle squinted. "Unorthodox good or unorthodox we think you're a danger." "Undetermined," said another delegate, this one a metallic sphere with embedded eyes that blinked asynchronously. "We have not encountered a species that prioritizes intent over utility so consistently." "Welcome to Earth," Kyle said, "where good intentions pave at least half the roads, but we still try to drive them." No one laughed or even twitched, the jelly being shifted color briefly, perhaps thinking. You chose not to eliminate the war criminal, the sphere said. Explain. I didn't trust the setup, Kyle said. One button and I end someone without trial, context, or oversight. That's not justice. That's a trap dressed like a shortcut. The fiber jelly pulsed again. Your honesty is noted, Corvin stepped forward. The Council has granted Earth Provisional Observer status. Your actions demonstrated behavioral patterns inconsistent with aggression. Kyle straightened. You mean we're a bunch of softies? No, said the metallic sphere. You are unpredictable. Unpredictability concerns us, but it also intrigues. The Council recessed without ceremony. The jelly form simply floated backward. The sphere blinked itself out of the chamber. The remaining two vanished through a doorway that shimmered and folded into itself. Corvin turned to Kyle. You will require surgical approval before returning to Earth. Great. Can I pick a hospital that doesn't look like a spaceship bathroom? There is only one medical unit, Corvin said. Back in the medbay, Vet was already preparing the surgical chamber. A low hum filled the room. Kyle was transferred onto a table that adjusted to his body mass in real time. A dome lowered above his chest with a hiss of sterilized air. No anesthesia, Kyle asked. You will remain conscious, Vet said. Your species processes sedatives inconsistently. We will block peripheral input instead. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. The overhead dome projected a series of calming images what Kyle assumed were supposed to be calming. One looked like a rotating fungus, another resembled a fractal version of stomach lining. Vet positioned a tool with a flexible head and inserted it into a port near Kyle's shoulder. There was no pain, just a sensation like someone was rearranging his skeleton with chopsticks. You perform repairs on other species often? Kyle asked, mostly to distract himself. Weakly, Vet said. The Vortec rupture their thoraxes in mating displays. The Andari shed limbs when startled. Your injury is refreshingly mundane. Glad I could bring some normalcy. Vet's upper arms moved with rhythmic precision. The tool emitted a soft clicking sound. Bone graft secured, Vet said. Ligament tension restored. You will experience limited range of motion for 5 standard days. Can I lift a cup with your other arm? The procedure ended without ceremony. Kyle was wheeled back to his quarters, now upgraded to include ergonomic seating and a small view of a starfield that looked suspiciously like a screensaver again. Hours passed. Kyle dozed. At some point, the door opened. Xalzor entered without comment, ducking beneath the frame. He carried a rectangular object under one arm. Kyle sat up slowly. I'm not fighting again, not until I can tie my own shoes. Xalzor placed the rectangle on the table. It unfolded into a holographic display rows of glowing tiles, symbols shifting constantly. I have compiled footage of your species' recorded conflicts, Xalzor said. I wish to understand the motivations behind your erratic strategies. Which one? Kyle asked. The time we faked a war to sell books, or the time we won one by playing bagpipes until the enemy surrendered? Xalzor said nothing, just stared at the display. Kyle leaned over. Look, we're not a hive. We don't have one mind. Some of us are brilliant, some of us are disasters. Most of us are both depending on the day. Xalzor tapped a tile. A video played, grainy footage of a human soldier carrying a comrade through gunfire. This behavior, it is not efficient. It's not supposed to be, Kyle said. It's what we call loyalty or stupidity. Depends who you ask. Xalzor didn't answer. He watched the footage again. Kyle leaned back. You're trying to map logic onto something that's built on emotion. We're messy, that's the point. Xalzor folded the display and stood. You are difficult to categorize. Good, Kyle said. Keep it that way. After Xalzor left, Kyle sat in silence. His shoulder ached, but the pain was smaller now. Manageable, he looked out the viewport. The stars didn't move, but the station hummed softly like it was digesting the day. A chime at the door. Corvin again, holding a small, sealed case. This belongs to you, he said. Your possessions were catalogued upon arrival. Kyle opened the case. Inside was a worn leather watch stopped at 2:17. He turned it over. The back was scratched, a gift from someone once. He didn't need to say who. "Thanks," Kyle said. Corvin watched him. "You are returning to Earth soon." "Yeah," Kyle said. "I've got a garden that needs failing at and a neighbor who thinks squirrels are alien drones." "Will you return?" Kyle didn't answer right away. He fastened the watch onto his good wrist. "Depends if you need me." Corvin tilted his head. "You are not what we expected." Kyle smiled, tired. "We never are." A day after the procedure, Kyle's body ached like it had been reassembled by committee. His shoulder was stiff, but the pain had dulled to a manageable throb, like someone pressing a thumb into a bruise every few minutes just to remind him who was in charge. He sat upright in the recovery lounge, still in the same gray jumpsuit, with a thermal wrap slung awkwardly over one side. The lounge was barely furnished. A low table, a recliner designed for spines that bent in the wrong direction, and a narrow viewport that showed a slowly tumbling asteroid field beyond the station. He was alone until the door hissed open and Corvin entered, this time carrying a polished container with a vapor seal. He placed it wordlessly on the table and took a step back. "You're not here to perform another test, are you?" Kyle asked, eyeing the container like it might try to hatch. "It is sustenance," Corvin said. "Prepared according to your dietary schema." Kyle peeled the lid back. Inside, a gelatinous cube quivered beside a stack of something that looked like compressed kelp. He poked it with one of the provided utensils, which flexed alarmingly. "I miss sandwiches," he muttered. "The cube contains protein structures derived from neutral biomass," Corvin said. That didn't make it better. He tried a bite anyway. It tasted faintly of walnuts and something chemical he couldn't place. He chewed slowly. "So is this the part where I'm debriefed again?" Kyle asked. "No. Your involvement with the council is concluded. This is a courtesy." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "A lunch courtesy." Corvin didn't respond right away. His eyes shifted slightly. A motion Kyle had learned meant he was considering something. "Xalzor has requested your presence again, not for combat or inquiry. He has elected to offer what your species might call an apology." Kyle stopped mid-chew. "That's new." "He has never apologized," Corvin said. "Not to any being." After a moment, Kyle set the utensil down. "All right, let's see what that looks like." They walked in silence through the corridor junctions, Kyle's pace slower than usual. The station lights dimmed briefly as they passed through a section undergoing atmospheric recalibration. Corvin led him to a chamber he hadn't visited before, smaller than the arena, but taller than any other room he'd seen, with a ceiling that arched like the inside of a cathedral. Glowing strands of something bioluminescent hung from the walls in slow, shifting patterns. Xalzor stood waiting at the far end. Gone was the combat stance, gone the rigid posture. His arms were lowered, and his armor-scale exterior had shed its usual copper sheen in favor of a matte, almost charcoal hue. Kyle stopped a few feet away. "I assume I'm not here for a sparring rematch." "No," Xalzor said. "There is no merit in repeating a defeat." Kyle crossed his arms, then winced and uncrossed them. "So what's this about?" "I reviewed every moment of our encounters, every decision you made. I attempted to chart it, to assign logic pathways. The results failed to converge. Let me guess. You figured I was either improvising or malfunctioning." "I considered both," Kyle snorted. "Well, you weren't wrong." Xalzor stepped forward. "Your actions during the trials violated all established models of self-preservation and competitive behavior." "That's kind of how we survive," Kyle said. "We don't always know the rules, so we bend them, or ignore them entirely." "You endangered yourself for me," Xalzor said. "And again for simulated civilians, then refused to execute a being whose guilt was proven." Kyle leaned against the wall carefully. "That's not the first time humanity's done something that doesn't make sense on paper." "I know," Xalzor said. "I studied your history. I encountered records of a conflict where your species paused hostilities to sing together across a battlefield." Kyle nodded. "Christmas truce, World War I. That moment has no equivalent in any known species. Yeah, well, we're full of surprises. Xalzor lowered his head slightly. I did not think I could be surprised, Kyle gestured around. Then why the chamber? Why now? I was wrong, Xalzor said. About your people. About the capabilities of a species that chooses compassion over control. Kyle didn't answer. He wasn't sure he needed to. There is more, Xalzor added. I have submitted a re-evaluation of Earth's classification status. I recommended your species not be placed under observation, but instead offered mentorship roles in adaptive conflict resolution. Kyle chuckled. You want us teaching other planets how to argue without blowing each other up? I do not want it, Xalzor said, but I believe it would work. Kyle looked around the chamber again. The light strands had shifted to a soft amber, pulsing like a heartbeat. Ever thought maybe the galaxy needs fewer conquerors and more bartenders? He asked. We're good at listening, we just don't always like what we hear. Xalzor took a step back. This is my apology, not just to you, but to your kind. Kyle nodded once. I'll take it. Later that cycle, Kyle was cleared for travel. Vet signed off his discharge with a set of instructions that included 5 days of restricted arm movement, no lifting anything heavier than a loaf of bread, and a warning about atmospheric pressure changes causing nerve flare-ups. Will I set off metal detectors? Kyle asked as Vet handed him the final scan report. You will not, Vet said. Unless your world's detection systems are absurdly sensitive to bioalloys. We're not that paranoid, Kyle muttered, then paused. Well, not all the time. The departure bay was quiet when he arrived. Earth's diplomatic shuttle waited on the far end of the hangar, its surface recently buffed, probably to look more impressive than its outdated thrusters actually were. Corvin appeared beside him. You are expected to brief your planetary council upon return. I'll tell them what happened, Kyle said. They probably won't believe half of it. Perhaps disbelief is part of your strength. Kyle glanced at him sideways. That or a national pastime. As the shuttle ramp lowered, Xalzor appeared once more. This time he carried nothing. No weapons, no data modules. He extended one hand. Kyle looked at it, then shook it with his good one. You ever visit Earth, let me know. I'll show you how we argue over pizza toppings. Xalzor tilted his head. Your species uses food to simulate conflict, only the important kinds. With that, Kyle boarded the shuttle. The hatch sealed behind him. Through the viewport, the station began to shrink, its blackstone hull absorbing light like a shadow that refused to vanish. As the shuttle broke orbit, Kyle leaned back in his seat, shoulder supported by a padded brace. He looked out at the stars, not as distant now, not quite so unknowable. The galaxy wasn't what Earth had expected. But then again, neither was Earth what the galaxy had planned for, and maybe that was the point.